Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon. I have a very great honor today to be a moderator of this discussion. My name is Toomas Kokovkin and I'm a member of the Estonian Polar Club. To be honest, there is a little bit of feeling of being in a theater. We have this makeup and spotlights and being on stage. So I hope that we shall have our discussion today so that we are not actors in the theater and you are just audience. We shall have a discussion for everybody. I have been in London in theater, in England, in London, in theater quite a few times. And I was surprised how actively the audience participated in the play. So hope that we today will do the same. We have now, for more than 1 hour, to talk about the polar diplomacy. For those who could not participate today in the morning sessions, we had a really very, very hardcore science day today, with some insights into the history and in geopolitical situation, but mostly it was real science. One presentation was specifically about cooperation in early 20th century. It was about adventure of a Norwegian. So, but now this, where we are now, we have to somehow talk about diplomacy, which was not much under discussion during the day. And we have to find something to say about polar diplomacy. Polar means areas of Arctic and Antarctic regions, so how diplomacy applies to these regions. But because our conference has a title of Arctic and Antarctic Science Cooperation, then I, as a moderator, I would very much like to stream the discussion into the scientific cooperation. But of course, you are absolutely free to give your messages, which you mean are important. Today, when we go home, because the target audience here is mostly scientific audience, we will try to give a message on how the diplomacy can be incorporated more into scientific research, how it can facilitate the scientific research, and probably how the scientists and researchers can be diplomats in the global cooperation. So that's this setting I would see, but of course we shall see where we arrive. But before we can continue, I will kindly ask you to introduce yourselves. Please, can we start from you to introduce one by one who you are, what you're representing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Olsen, General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile, I'm a career diplomat, former ambassador concurrent here to Estonia. My background is full diplomacy, and I would love to share with you how these are the linkages between the Arctic and Antarctica from this vision from the south.
My name is Olivares. Kas see töötab tal?
I do think it's on
Yeah.
now. Yeah. My name is Misund. I'm coming from Norway. I am a special advisor at the Norwegian Polar Institute at the moment. I have been the director there for 6 years. I have also been the director of the University Center in Svalbard, which Rico outlined so very nicely about earlier today. My background is as a fishery biologist in the Institute of Marine Research in Bergen, where I've worked for 25 years. And as a special advisor, I am also back to science and occupied also with writing about science diplomacy. Thank you.
Hi everybody. I don't know if it works.
No?
Can somebody switch it on because from here it's on? Can somebody switch it on? Thank you. I'm Kersti Kaljulaid, former president of Estonia from 16 to 21. I have, well, my education is natural science, like probably some others on this panel do. Right now I'm running President Kaljulaid Foundation, which is protecting weaker in our society and strengthening democratic processes, equality, and these aspects of the society. And I also do some foreign and defense policy work still in Munich conference, Globsec conference, Jotec Center, and some other things, also helping Ukrainians through Yalta European Strategy Forum, organizing conferences in Kiev right now in the wartime. Yes, it can be done, but it's tough. We're doing it.
Okay. My name is Valur Ingimundarson. I'm a professor of history at the University of Iceland. I am originally a Cold War historian, but then I moved more into contemporary things and about geopolitics, governance, Icelandic foreign security, and Arctic policies and political memory, for example, in the Balkans. So I'm into several things.
Hi, I'm Aveliina Helm. I'm here as a science advisor to the Minister of Climate from the Ministry of Climate, where my task is to advise Minister on the policy making regarding the scientific impacts and steer the policies towards more inclusive of scientific findings. But I'm also a professor of restoration ecology at the University of Tartu, so I'm also naturalist in my education, and I also study and research environmental issues, mostly biodiversity related issues, ecosystem protection and human impacts on and climate change impacts on ecosystems, like many here as well.
Thank you very much. As you may notice that in the program we have a different name, so just to say that the climate change happens so rapidly, and also the decisions of the Ministry of the Climate the same.
That's true. Yes, our Secretary General had a very rapid task in another country. Diplomacy, definitely.
Good to have you here, Aveliina. Today, if you remember what we discussed earlier, was mostly about Arctic region, because we are in the northern hemisphere, and countries representing here were mostly Arctic countries. But we have representative from the southern hemisphere, and tomorrow will be discussion and presentations about Antarctic. So I think it would be appropriate to start actually with enlarging the geographical dimension of this discussion. And I will kindly ask Mr. Rodrigo to give first statements from your perspective, from the other side of the globe.
Well, thank you so much. I think coming from the south, in that sense, I think that the first message, I think that for us in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the way that you're conceiving scientific cooperation is very important, because the first thing that we conceived is that science is not neutral, in the sense that we need to have an umbrella under the political institution. For instance, in our case, the National Institute, the National Antarctic Institute, belongs to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has an independent budget. They discuss independently in the cross the budget of the National Antarctic Institute, but belongs to the Ministry of Affairs in the sense that is currently following the principles of our foreign policy. And the Antarctic issues is a very keen aspect and very important key role plays in our foreign policy, because we, even if we understand that the whole Antarctic treaty system is under, it's freezing politically speaking, no? But we have clearly a vision regarding sovereign purposes and jurisdictional reclamations that are freezing in the Antarctic zone, but we have 5, 6 bases currently working. For instance, in this season are clearly 5 bases working in a scientific way. They're clearly the leadership in the bases is under the armed forces, but with a strong cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and this National Antarctic Institute that belongs to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is the main focus that we have, and we are always considering, and in our internal talks with the National Institute, the Antarctic Institute, is always the need to conceive scientific cooperation under this umbrella, but at the same time, the scientific cooperation allow us to isolate sometimes some kind of multilateral fragmentation that we suffer, and it's a perfect scenario in order as well to have scientifics for every corner in the planet carrying and sharing the same purposes. And in that sense, on the other view, for instance, I understand that polar diplomacy means as well that we need a strong institutionality behind in order to deal with. For instance, in the Antarctic treaty system, we have different bodies that works clearly in a scientific dimension, a scientific approach. So for instance, we have the SCAR. We hosted a month ago the big meeting of the SCAR in Pucón in Chile, where it was a venue where you have a strong community, international scientific community in our country, sharing their views and providing us all the good benefits that the science could provide us as a country. So it was a very good exchange of views of the different scientists there. And the other important for us as a ministry is to have a strong dimension of multidisciplinary approach with other ministries that belongs to the public administration. So Antarctic issues are clearly a very important issue in the Ministry of Science, as well in the Ministry of Defense, and in the Ministry of Environment. So this whole ecosystem works on behalf of a very good approach regarding scientific and providing funds from the different communities of scientists. And at the same time, as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we clearly work in a bilateral way, helping to create the exchange between scientific communities. For instance, today we had the second round of political consultation with the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we have signed a letter of intent in polar cooperation in order to facilitate and in order to enhance cooperation between the respective scientific communities. So it's a very good instrument that we could provide to the scientific community in order to keep connected to each other in this way. Even we have very participatory and inclusive approach that we facilitate contacts with the participation with the civil society as well, because we are really keen on doing this, and the participation of women as a scientist in the program. So this is clearly important for us. We are just conducting a feminist foreign policy, so the government is fostering the presence of women under the leadership of different programs in the scientific community.
Thank you. Arve, you wanted to add something?
Yes, of course, coming from Norway, our main focus is the Arctic. Our northernmost counties are in the Arctic, and we are every day focusing on the sovereignty of Svalbard and the research we are doing there and the community of Longyearbyen and so on. But we also have a substantial interest in the Antarctic and a very good cooperation with Chile, among others, the INACH, the Chilean Polar Institute, and taking part in the scientific community there and the Antarctic treaty system. And this is so important for Norway that one of the main projects in the years to come is to modernize the research station we have in Dronningmodland, the Troll station. It's going to cost something like 2.4 billion Norwegian kroner. It's not a large facility. It will be for 65 people, but it is up in the mountains and very costly. But this shows the Norwegian government's priority regarding the Antarctica. We want to be a serious actor in the Antarctic treaty system. We are participating in the scientific community in SCAR. I personally had a role in taking part in developing the new research strategy for SCAR, which is called Urgent Messages from the South. We see substantial changes in Antarctica. Melting is going on in Western Antarctica. The ecosystem on land is changing, and in the sea we see acidification. There is a southward migration of marine organisms like the krill resource and so on. And it is important for us, even if we are a small but a bipolar country, to say that we also are relevant in Antarctica. And the next big scientific conference about Antarctica, the SCAR conference in 2026, will be in Oslo. So I invite you to come to Oslo in that sense in August in 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Kersti, you are well known in Estonia as an Antarctic sailor. But maybe please give us some insights about also this dimension of Antarctic and polar cooperation.
First, I would like to say that Estonia has applied to join the Arctic Council, and my then colleague Sauli Niinistö was very enthusiastic about our application, and we did everything to join. But as it takes anonymous, you have to have a kind. Everybody has to support newcomers. Then obviously we may have one neighbor who was not so interested in allowing Estonia to join. So this is still work in progress. Second, on Antarctic, yes, I was there, yes, and frankly that was one of the best and cheapest advertising campaigns for Estonia, because you know, we are a digital nation and this is well known globally, but not maybe in every big company we have been seen this way. But because when I was there, then Inmarsat was testing their new generation of satellites, and it was advertised that it might be fast enough connection now to allow Estonian digital signature to be given from Antarctica. And it was possible, we did it. And then the company used only 3 use cases to, promote and prove their new satellites orbiting the world. And one of them was me giving signature, Estonian digital signature. And you can see, the advertising value for country which we got for free, because we did it. So it was, I believe, one of the best and at the same time least known kind of advertisement campaigns run, to make Estonia bigger than it is. Similarly, Estonia was, when I was in office, running for the UN Security Council membership, and that meant that we really cozied up with countries on the southern hemisphere. And we did work a lot also with Latin America and of course this part which I would say, I don't like the name, but it's called South-South. So basically for me, I work with Africa and I work with Latin America and CARICOM and Pacific Islands, and I don't like this name at all. I think this is not fair and kind of has this kind of Europocentric or Northern Hemisphere-centric sound to it. But indeed, I was in Antarctic and we visited quite many polar bases there as well. And what I noticed was, and maybe it's not very diplomatic to say so, but because you can only establish scientific bases in Antarctic, then everybody is building laboratories with additional arms. which is, I mean, for countries from your part of the world, I think it's perfectly natural because you want to be there if, as you so nicely put it, if the kind of Antarctic agreement system freezes while the continent is melting, then there might be interesting developments geopolitically. So your presence there is perfectly understandable from that point of view. But I don't think people in this country or even on this hemisphere think too much about it. But this is clearly going on there, which means you find quite a lot of underused scientific equipment and laboratories on the continent. And Estonians who had at that time kind of grandiose expectations that one day maybe we also will have a bases in Antarctic for scientific reasons. Well, we put this kind of 2 and 2 together and came up with the proposal that actually Estonian scientists should cooperate with all these nice laboratories which already are there and certainly were not overused. So I know that Tarmo Soomere, who was the president of Estonian Academy of Science at that point, on my prompt took contact with some countries in the region, and some cooperation actually resulted from that. So this has been kind of where and how Estonia has been promoting its presence and visibility in the region for various reasons, and also been probably scientifically well and still is, I'm sure, able to cooperate and also add some value for everybody. I mean, for those with whom we cooperate and ourselves, because we actually have a long tradition of polar research. From the times of when we were living under Soviet occupation, our scientists were able to work in Soviet bases, but also later on we have had Estonian scientists participating in Arctic missions, being on this French ship which was stuck in ice for one whole winter season, and I mean some other expeditions where Timo Palo has been present and some other scientists. So we have been we have kind of a cluster of scientists who do polar research. And of course, not being a big nation, this is kind of innovative ways and kind of, let's say, tailor-made and out-of-the-box solutions, which you have to look for to participate in scientific cooperation. Politically, yes, our message has been clear and still is clear. We are a responsible country who worries about climate change. We have scientists who can contribute to analyzing and understanding processes, and this is what we plan to do also in the future. So notwithstanding any travels, I think we have a kind of coherent proposal for nations who work in Arctic and in Antarctic that, I mean, we can do things together and they're valuable things.
Thank you. Mr. Valur, I know that you are a specialist in governance and in geopolitics. We shall speak about governance maybe a little bit later when we come to this point. But please, can you add from the perspective of geopolitics what you have heard and how it can be related to the scientific research?
Yeah, just a couple of points. What the Antarctica and the Arctic have now in common is kind of a weakening of a collaborative or cooperative governance regimes. Both cases. During the Cold War, the Antarctica Treaty was basically underwritten by the United States and the Soviet Union, freezing all the territorial claims. They have not been legitimized, but they have been frozen. So it was, after that, this collaborative regime was maintained. During the Cold War, of course, in the Arctic, it was a militarized region. But after the end of the Cold War, this notion, what Mikhail Gorbachev called the zone of peace, entered into the frame, and basically that has been, and this notion of Arctic exceptionalism. And this is a special region with, where everybody was collaborating. I mean, in both cases, these perceptions and projections are now in threat. No, they're under threat. In Antarctica, what we are seeing now, is there is very little kind of agreement on things. There was a conference last month. There was every environmentally protective measure was vetoed, for example, and in discussions there is, countries, they vote along geopolitical lines. So, and now there are new bases, scientific bases are being set up, often near kind of natural resource-rich areas, with raising the question of whether this is a harbinger of what is to come, whether a race for natural resources, or whether either just if one or two countries begin just to or discount or reject this regime, collaborative regime, or begin to undermine the treaty, by not abiding by monitoring mechanisms or surveillance mechanisms. And you can see this could happen there. In the Arctic, of course, now after the geopolitical turn, I mean, the Arctic Council is basically dysfunctional. I mean, there are just 7 Western states now and Russia. And of course, the good thing is, at least since we are talking about science cooperation, is kind of the working groups are still, in place, but of course under a much weakened position. So we can discuss more later what will happen. I don't know, but there is a sense that this whole cooperation in the Arctic could break up.
Let's keep it for the later discussion. Thank you, Aveliina. Thank you.
Yeah, I continue with this from much simpler perspective. Like when you're working in a ministry, then you sometimes have to convince people or administrative offices or politicians in importance of having the collaboration in the Arctic region, in the polar regions, and all the time. I know many people here are familiar with it, have to prove that this is in Estonian interests to act in these regions as well, as a small country, non-Arctic country, but still the northernmost, and with a lot of expertise in the respective fields. So if just to outline these important topics that make polar regions so relevant in Estonia or to Estonia, or actually to whole EU, then I think the changes that will come very rapidly and are already there with the climate change place our region of the world and your region of the world to the very center of the changes. It is like a powerhouse is a positive word, but the powerhouse of negative changes in a way as well, regarding the rapid geopolitical and security aspects that we heard previously, but also very rapid environmental changes that we are going to face, and that the Arctics and the Antarctics are already facing. So from Estonian context, I think these changes, they place us together with our neighboring countries and other EU in the very center of the world, because of the importance of polar areas in the future, in the geopolicy and security and the environment. But I also wanted to remind that I'm very glad that today is the day that Chilean Ministry of Foreign Affairs is here, and I understand you signed the memorandum of understanding, because the scientific work between two countries has been very successful and very positive and friendly, as I have heard, and future looking, and I'm very glad that this is also now in a way official or thinking in the same terms. But Estonia has a long history, and in Antarctic as well, that already our German Baltic captains of 18th century, 19th century, they were the first one to make a voyage around the world. Captain von Krusenstern was of Estonian origin, and he was followed by Captain von Bellingshausen, who was apparently or claimedly the first one to observe Antarctics, and they are both of Estonian origin. So our kind of long-lasting love of polar region is embedded in our cultural history as well, and we have a number of writers who have also carried it through our culture. So I'm very glad that we have this kind of strong community. First, a community, small, around maybe 50 scientists, small but very strong community of polar researchers, and we have diplomatic connections with countries. Estonia is working towards also being a member of the Madrid Environmental Protection Convention, Antarctic Treaty Convention of Environmental Protection. It has been a long-lasting process, but we'll see where it goes and how it will happen. Currently, I think we again discuss budgets and related costs. But nevertheless, I'm very happy that we have all these diplomatic and scientific collaborations, and the science is the best diplomacy, isn't it?
I think so, yes. But may I add to the information about the Estonians going to ground the world? A small island of Hiiumaa, had a ship named Hiiumaa in 1854. The Maritime Museum may correct me, already went around the Cape Horn to take fertilizers from Peru. So I'm sure they went to Chile as well. But please, audience, now you know our distinguished guests. Please do have already some questions or comments about the topic.
Meanwhile, I think it's still worth reminding and telling also our foreign colleagues here that Krusenstern and Bellingshausen, of course, were of German origin. I mean, they were Baltic Germans, and then Bellingshausen served in, for Russians, basically equipped his ship in UK, so it was a truly multilateral process of discovering Antarctic. But indeed, when it was around the anniversary of seeing Antarctic first time, then we actually had a very interesting situation where an Estonian ship landed in Antarctic, and we met with our Russian neighbors with whom we had relatively better relations at that point of time than now, and we celebrated together in the Bellingshausen bases in Antarctic this, and we actually had our Estonian central bank had issued a coin for this occasion, and we presented it in that Russian base. And so it was kind of funny that we kind of had a joint celebration, and this is just to show you how quickly relations have, got worse around also Antarctic and Arctic questions. I think it very nicely illustrates what you said. There is a risk of a collapse of cooperation even. And that was, when it was 200th anniversary of sighting Antarctic, when the ship went. It's not so long ago, less than a decade. So things change really quickly.
Kas meil on mikrofone veel või võtame siit? Näed siin esireas, proua.
Thank you. My name is Kokovkin, and I am from the Baltic island of Hiiumaa. And we very clearly remember that the Baltic once was totally frozen. It was in, was it 17th century? Yeah?
I don't remember.
Well, we remember. But coming to the cooperation and worsening of the cooperation, how are the sanctions actually applied towards Russia because of this aggression? It has not only in Russia, in Ukraine, but also all over the world now. So we know that we all know that the Russian scientific base in Svalbard, it has very little to do with the science, actually. So how the sanctions are applied in the Nordic sphere? Yeah, thank you.
Please.
Yes, if I may outline an answer. From the Norwegian side, the bilateral relations to Russia are on ice. That's the official version. At the same time, the authorities allow science scientist-to-scientist contact. For instance, regarding polar scientific issues, common projects and so on, there are personal contacts with Russian scientists so that time series are maintained and data for various projects are collected. And this policy was developed immediately after the Russian attack on Ukraine on the 24th of March in 2022. Just a matter of days afterwards, this policy was coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Climate and Environment. So there is some contact, and especially regarding, for instance, the living resources in the Barents Sea. The large fish stocks, which is so vital for Norwegian economy, especially in the coastal areas in the northernmost counties. There is close contact with Russian scientists, so that, for instance, the joint Norwegian-Russian Fishery Commission has recently had its meeting, digitally, of course, on Teams or on Zoom. And on the basis of the scientific advice developed in agreement with the Norwegian scientist and the Russian scientist, there was a political decision on the level of the quotas for next year. And they still follow the scientific advices quite closely. It was deviated a little, but the science is the basis for this cooperation. So there is contact, and it is possible to establish, if there is a solution in Ukraine or something, it is a possibility to quite quickly re-establish the relations. There are, of course, other issues that may make this difficult, but there is some contact so that we can have a certain relation, but it is much lower than before, and it's strictly to the point. So the email exchange, for instance, is very technical, very scientific. There is nothing about the weather or how the life is as it was in the 90s and 2000, for instance. We have personal relationships to many of the researchers, of course, but this is gone. There is no comment on anything, just the technical issues. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very good message from your side now that actually as you also emphasized, the science is the way to make diplomacy and to keep some level even at the very difficult times. But somebody said that there are rapid changes. And today the whole morning was about showing us that there are rapid changes in climate, that there is warming, at least in the northern hemisphere, from the presentations. And from your perspective, from your expertise, does this already influence your understanding of how things go on? How are the not only political but positional, geopolitical changes in the world related to the climate change? And do you expect that scientists can do something more apart from studying and declaring the existing change? Is there any tool more for the scientists in this situation?
If I may, I mean, from the political viewpoint, and Aveliina and others can maybe support also from the scientific viewpoint, but from the political viewpoint, here in Europe we have actually agreed collectively to, and maybe unknowingly, to give up some of our economic supremacy globally in order to, go clean and demonstrate that kind of a developed economies can also use less the resources of this planet, and actually I think we are paying quite a lot for that. The whole Europe is suffering from the lack of energy, because basically nobody has been investing into the dirty energy production, and also because there has been really unclarity about how this new green market for energy will operate, and also investments into the green without government subsidies has been very difficult to obtain. So basically we've broken up European common market in order to be able to subsidize energy, and we have even not consciously announced that we've broken up the European Union common market, but we're just doing it. Everybody is subsidizing their energy production and clean energy creation, but since energy is omnipresent in absolutely every economic sector, then the common European market cannot function if the energy market cannot function. So there is considerable economic, which means also socio-economic damage to European economy, because we consciously choose to lead on this planet for the green change. We could have done it better. We could have been, more kind of giving more foresight into into this new market function. We have not been able to do it, but at least we have decided that green we go and clean we go by the 2050. And because this message from this quite rich and big market, because it is still one of the richest and biggest markets globally if you take us together, this message penetrated into the corporate sphere. And this means that by now, and I think this is the achievement of the European kind of common politics and policy making on green turn, is that now, when basically we can stop COPs and we can have COP conferences where the leading nation comes out and says that oil is a fantastic stuff and we should continue using it as intensely as possible, it wouldn't change, because quite a lot of investment, quite a lot of research on the private sector side has gone into the green turn, so that these sunken costs there now are so considerable that turning back is not possible. So we will trudge on. And I was present in one conference where one leader of a big company, it was not an open conference, it was Chatham, so I cannot say who, but he said that he has the feeling that everything which, when you start doing things, looks kind of impossible, it is starting to look more and more inevitable. So basically, scientists, of course, need to keep measuring and warning and telling us what is going wrong. But politicians can actually rest their feet, put them up and now enjoy, because big companies have decided to go green, and they will go green because they have now it's the race to the bottom that way, and it will happen. Of course, politicians anyway have been the weakest part of this pact. It's always been more like scientists and economy. And politicians, if they had known that, for example, Europe will have these socio-economic consequences, probably will not have dared to decide, but they didn't know, and they kind of sleepwalked into this situation. But finally, when the humankind comes out at the other end, I think Europe can be proud of this achievement. And finally also, Europe will also gain, because quite many green technologies have been fostered here in Europe. So this means finally, we will also gain from having developed these technologies and put their development cost down. So it's a kind of a very long process, very hard to explain. I don't know those who have high gas prices right now in Europe, but I think Europe has done something really valuable, which we should actually be proud of.
Yes, I can only agree. I was just in the last COP in Azerbaijan, which is a oil-rich country, and there was very the distinction or division was actually very, very visible. But it does not, as Kersti put it very well, that it does not change the course anymore. And I think even the other political changes that we have across the world won't change this course. But I agree that Europe has been a leader in this. It has been shown in every COP, although again, as Kersti put it very nicely, we can leave the COPs, and in this regard, regarding the transition, this will start to happen, and this will continue to happen. But where we are lacking, and I think in the case of polar regions and in geopolitical regions, geopolitical context, what is more and more influential is the actual impact of the change and our ability to adapt with it, and our neighbors and not friendly neighbors and not so friendly neighbors. Plans of how they plan to adapt with it and make use of these changes. Arctic regions, polar regions, they have this huge overspilling impact to Europe, to the world. So it's like this very, very strong driver of change. But what I think there are a number of countries who are keenly waiting for these changes to reach some kind of threshold in order to start pushing into the agenda that they might have already long time. I don't know whether Europe has this kind of future notion or agenda for the future to counteract those trends, but I think we should have, because we are facing simultaneously changing environmental conditions that make us weaker, and our own ability to adapt more difficult, plus simultaneously very big change and interesting drivers from other countries and their decisions on what was actually very well also outlined in the US policy perspective that was put up there. Yeah, so adaptation to changes, environmental and geopolitical.
There is an important point I would like to raise regarding the role of science, which was your question, for promoting polar diplomacy. And the scientific community have quite a long perspective. From time to time, there have been polar years. The last one was in 2008, 2009. Big international campaigns, both in the Arctic and in Antarctica. And the next one is going to be in 2032, 2033. So 8-9 years from now. It takes time to plan such big campaigns in the different nations, and then to align the different projects between the nations. And there are many scientific organizations that will be involved and so on. The SCAR, the scientific community in Antarctica, and the IASC, the International Arctic Science Community up north in Arctic, will have a leading role in doing this. And it's a possibility for all nations to participate. In Norway, we have now established a national committee for starting to plan what shall be our contributions, and it's up to other nations to join in. And in this respect, the scientific community is aligning itself so that they can underpin and contribute to a polar diplomacy, which is more needed now than in many years because of the geopolitical difficulties. At the same time, there is a sense of urgency, really a sense of urgency, which makes this green transition, which was spoken so very well of with the two colleagues here, because we see changes in the polar regions, which is really dramatic. I have been 2 years ago on the North Pole with our polar research vessel, Kronprins Haakon, named after the Norwegian Crown Prince. And to our surprise, it was so open. There was still ice, but it was so open that it was possible to trawl with a pelagic trawler. It was possible to fish. Just, let's say, 15 years ago, we had scientists on board that vessel which landed on the Russian Borneo station, which was there every summer. They could land on a plane. There was a bulldozer making the runway and so on. And that is not possible anymore because it is an area with, of course, there is ice and ice flows and so on, but a lot of leads, which makes it possible even to fish. We didn't catch anything, but that was not the main point. The main point was that it was so very open. And in Antarctica, in the troll station, up in the mountains at high altitude, where we very rarely see water. I have seen running meltwater myself when I've been there also. So there is really a sense of urgency of what is going on with our Earth system at the moment, and with the greenhouse gases and the temperature rise and so on, and we need this green transition, and the scientific community has an important role in underpinning that by presenting knowledge, even to those who won't listen. But I worked with Norwegian fishermen for 25 years, and if you continue and continue and continue with giving messages that this is the development, finally it goes in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think the role of science in the decision-making process is something that has been changed. At least in our regional group, in the GRULAC, in the Latin American groups, in the multilateral level, even the bilateral level, the way that the countries from the south are facing, for instance, the negotiation processes right now is clearly different that we usually had 20 or 30 years ago. The way that the scientific community is clearly involved in the decision-making process is something that expresses the need of urgency, the need to act now that we have, and clearly the climate ambition in this way and the energy transition policies that we have at the domestic level is clearly show us the role of the science, how has been have been evolving the last time. For instance, in my experience, at least in the BBNJ treaty, in the High Seas Treaty is clearly like that. It's a very multidisciplinary approach in the way that we negotiate with others internally and then with the others in the UN forum. For instance, integrating people from the science, scientific, people from the scientific community, people from the private sector that represent the interests, for instance, from the fisheries in the BBNJ treaty, people from civil society. We decided to incorporate people from the civil society in our national delegation. I think it's a very interesting approach. It's not only Chilean one. I could observe that it's something that, at least in the Latin American region, it's clearly getting even normal. I think that to count on scientific evidence is clearly a strong basis for us as a diplomat in order to incorporate the scientific dimension in the foreign policy approach. We are getting stronger and stronger if we incorporate and we are adding the scientific spectrum in our final decision. I think it's evident, and we need to do that in every aspect of the current negotiation process that we're facing right now.
I just wanted to say that maybe it's also interesting to talk a little bit why, but in Estonia, actually, Estonian scientific community has done a notoriously bad job of helping our politicians to get this message through to our citizens, that this is a serious thing. Despite the fact that, you go outside and you get +10 in end of November, very few people are scared. And this change has been extremely rapid. If you look back at the last 4 or 5 years, then this it seems to be kind of a hockey stick turn point also for this country. Yet, even in our own Academy of Science, some elderly academicians, advocate for sustaining polluting technologies in this country, which makes economic transition to green economy in this country particularly difficult. And I feel our scientists have actually failed our community in putting this message through, which now results in a lost decade in our industry because we didn't take this seriously. I've myself given up on convincing our citizens on climate change. What I've instead been doing for 10 years now has been like, look, our main trading partners go green and clean. So you just lose your economy, which is now happening. But because this message from science in Estonia has been far from loud and clear and delivered with a single voice, that we need to wean ourselves from polluting technologies. This country is now actually suffering economically, and this is the fault also of our scientific community.
Kadri Tam from Tallinn Technological University, from Department of Energy Technology. So actually, Kersti, thank you. You were almost going my thoughts also. And actually I was just thinking that if we are like developing very fantastic technology, which will help not only our area, but already all polar areas. But okay, one thing what we can do is like we're presenting the papers, we will participate the conferences. So what you suggest, what as we as scientists should do that, how can we improve our voice at that, and our voice will like cover the global. So what you suggest?
I think every scientist should first speak only based on their own scientific capabilities. So if you are an energy scientist, don't speak for climate, vice versa, listen to your colleagues, listen to Aveliina and others, who are specialists in this area. If you are, gene technologist, don't speak on the social sciences if you don't understand, what is going on there. This is my message to scientists, but I'm not a scientist. How can I teach the smartest people of all? But somehow, Estonian scientific community has indeed failed to speak with one voice, and this is the biggest problem. And you see where these voices that it's not a problem is coming. It's coming from energy and the oil shale sector, which in Estonia is very strong. Also, oil shale is science in Estonia, because we're very proud what we can do of oil shale. So in a way, I would say that get your own house in order, then you are more convincing.
I want to bring take kind of from the tail of this discussion and perhaps steer it back to the changing polar regions. That maybe this is one of the unused opportunity, or one emerging opportunity, that the polar regions, unfortunately, are also the regions of several dangerous tipping points, which might already be happening. We don't know that, but we can predict that if they are not already happening, they are likely to happen or might happen. The tipping points that make large changes in the climate system and kind of inevitably trigger other changes after them, which is, for example, the melting of the ice of the Arctic, or opening up the Arctic Ocean and methane emissions and so on. So maybe we can also discuss on this sense that how we can put this good scientific knowledge and collaboration into good use in policy making while using this very rapidly changing visible environment that we all feel and can use better for communication. This is the sense of urgency and sense of danger is here, I think, everywhere. So, yeah.
Thank you.
It's just a question. Or yeah.
Just want to add one point about. I totally agree with that. Scientists and scholars should be involved in this climate debate and try to pressure politicians. But I also want to point to one thing. That sometimes, and I know that scholars are reluctant to become involved in political debates, and particularly since often, particularly if governments are anti, green, then they can be punished. Politicians who control budgets, it will affect them, or then they also begin to talk down to scholars and scientists. They are a nuisance. They're into politics. This is just part of politics. So I just want to say that this is a fact, really, in this, I don't know about Estonia, but elsewhere that I've been involved in, that politicians sometimes penalize scientists who speak up.
Yeah, but this is unfair. Everybody, if you speak up, then you are being brave. And if we felt this way, that you may be penalized, then I'm sorry, there is a larger cause. I had a boss who was prime minister in this country. I was his advisor, and he always said, yes, I will do these unpopular things because I know that people will later understand this was right. And I mean, sometimes it's worth to be penalized if you know that you are standing for the right cause. And indeed, scientists tend to be cowards, I agree. I mean, thinking of the finance and everything. In Europe, this is not an argument because you have the European Union Research and Development Foundation, go seek there. Particularly for smaller countries, not a problem, I mean, that if local politicians really shun you. But this has not been the case in Estonia, frankly speaking. Because in Estonia, politicians have really rather felt that they are left alone. I mean, it's like, I need your arguments. And they're not loud enough to make people to, believe. And I have this feeling like politicians have been left alone, not that politicians are not ready to, Estonian politicians are applying European green messages and being penalized, because people don't vote for green policies. This means we are left behind, left actually alone, standing alone there without scientific support. And that's our problem. So it may be different maybe in some other countries, but in this country it's this way.
Ma nägin teid. We have been working now for more than an hour. You have given a very strong picture of where we are. And before we go further we are starting to wrap up. But before we go further, I just asked any new questions from the audience. Please, the lady in the first row and then you.
Thank you. The melting of the ice, which is a catastrophe for globally, it opens in many cases very lucrative and aggressive possibilities for digging and searching and fighting and using these natural resources that were kept under the ice so far. What can scientific and diplomatic and political sphere do if these diggers and foundings are done by not so very friendly communities? Thank you. States.
Maybe we can take the other question too, so we can choose answers. Otherwise, we run out of time answering this one. So there was one, I think. Over there.
Thank you. Martin Lira from Geological Survey of Estonia. So I'm more concerned about the geopolitics. My history teacher told me that all the international agreements are made to be broken. It's just a matter of time. So you as a politician or close to politicians, what do you think, what kind of world will be when the Svalbard Treaty or Antarctic Treaty or the Arctic Council is already brain dead? So what will happen and what kind of perspectives we can have in this sense? Thank you.
Interestingly, this was the same question actually. I mean, breaking down of these treaties a collateral damage. I mean, we are right now in a huge geopolitical shift where, good ones need to understand quickly that, they need to all stick together, have more free trade among themselves, more common objectives, and stand up against the bad ones, and forget the economic benefits of really getting along with the bad ones right now. So, if this can be done, then all these other issues can be handled as well. Otherwise, indeed, I think it's a collateral damage that also these agreements will suffer because there is no multilateralism. How to fight it? I think since Peloponnesus Wars, people, humankind have kept, kind of building gradually a kind of a multilateral cooperation order which respects, human and national rights, and then it all breaks down and we restart again. I'm sorry, I'm a pessimist in this context. I think this is where we now are. We are in this breakdown phase. There will be a build-up, but maybe it will be a much smaller humankind because meanwhile we will miss, these kind of dramatic climatic changes.
Yeah, I think that we need, particularly in this uncertain times that we are facing, we need to appeal for our rule-based order So we need to believe in that. We need to foster and strengthening the whole system, even if we could be pessimistic regarding how it's working right now. For instance, the whole United Nations ecosystem, but it's the framework that we have. So we need to still believe in us as an international community, and we need rules. We need a rule-based order, particularly if we're facing two conflicts nowadays. And obviously, if you have war in your backyard, obviously the objective of a sustainable development world is clearly entering a conflict of even regarding funding or financial aspects regarding these two urgent crises that you have to face. No? The environmental crisis, the need for more renewable energy, energy transition in our countries obviously have an impact. No? But I think that at least countries, intermediate-sized countries like Chile, we need to be attached more and more to stronger institutionality, particularly in the international community. We need to believe that. And then, well, I don't know how it's going to be evolving in the future. So yeah, we could be pessimistic, but at the same time, we need to foster, for instance, international cooperation in the different dimensions. Even, okay, UNFCCC, the last COP in Baku, someone could consider that it wasn't that good, but, well, there was an answer at the very end regarding climate finance. Maybe it's not the best, but we need to keep working on that and believe in us as a community. There's no way out.
I just plan to turn towards the future and ask about what shall we do, but you already started this answer now. And please, word is yours.
I have to say also I'm a pessimist. But now, and also there are divisions, for example, within the Arctic Council, among the Arctic, the Western Arctic states. I mean, whether the system is irreparably broken or whether it can be amended. And that's, of course, the big question. And now I think for those who say we should show, well, the phrase is strategic patience or whatever, you know, just not rock the boat too much at this phase, is because the alternative is worse. Because Russia, for example, can just create another organization that's what is being discussed with friendly states, you know, BRICS states or someone who want to be could be brought in, and then it would be a total division, Cold War division, you know, again. So that is what is being discussed now. And for that reason, I think, and you could hear our American contributor, she didn't go, and she was basically parroting a lot the American position, but she did not go so far as saying this is totally broke. I mean, we want to see what will come out of it. So yeah, that's basically the option now, whether we continue and see what will happen in Ukraine. It will very much depend on what's happened there, and or we are faced with a new Cold War in the Arctic.
Did you want to add?
Yes, I can, and I choose to be an optimist. And this is because my background is as a fisherman, actually. And as a fisherman, you have to have an optimistic view. The natural resources are renewing itself every year. Large fish stocks coming to the coast and out in the Norwegian Sea, on the Barents Sea, and they're renewing themselves and bringing large biomasses to the coast available for catching and so on. But my career has since been in science, and I see that the scientific community is aligning itself to be able to underpin polar diplomacy in a very good way in the years to come. I'm quite sure, because I see a substantial build-up for the polar years 2032, 2033. It will be a big effort, I'm sure, and the scientific organizations are functioning very well. We have now, just a few years ago, we had 2 years where we didn't travel. We stayed in our homes, maybe in our offices, but we didn't travel. Still, we were able to keep the international cooperation on a very high level. Nobody could foresee what we were able to do in the years of COVID. We run the Antarctic Scientific Organization, for instance, elected new chairmen, developed programs, and were able to keep contact. My computer during these meetings were taken over by computer company in Melbourne, who saw that I have a fast enough internet to be able to participate in these meetings, and my picture was there, and I could speak and vote and so on. So we have a technology which we didn't have some years ago, and we are able to keep contact, and I'm sure the smart people of the world are going to see too that the world will function and not collapse in an ice front or a new Cold War. That's it is not the time for that. I mean, the changes that we see on the basis of the way we have been living, using fossil energy and so on, we need to underpin this green shift with new technology, and the role of science is definitely to be outspoken and again provide the knowledge that the society need for a sustainable development for the years to come. Thank you.
I'm an idealistic optimist with a very realistic and low bar that is very easy, very easy to. Well, I am never surprised if things go not so well. My bar of expectations is extremely low. But I do want to express the positive side then, and I do believe in collaboration, and we don't know how many treaties or how many good diplomacy, how often it has happened in the history that good diplomacy and agreements have kept something bad happening. These things are left unknown to us. We only see when it fails, the diplomacy fails, or when the collaboration fails, and when nations are often joined by outer enemy, then we might. Let's say optimistically, idealistically, look into the future when we are joined in collaboration while facing the outer enemy in this environmental change and the need to address it. And I am freshly coming from the COP, maybe you were there as well, and what you get the feeling, there is the sense of collaboration, and there is this power shift that you feel that there are more those who want a positive change and less those who don't want it or work against it. So maybe there is a balance somewhere that is tilting us in a positive way, and in this the scientific community has indeed extremely large and perhaps not so well filled obligation that in the future this needs to be more clear, that in this collaboration and facing this environmental outer enemy, we can only kind of go forward. So all the world's scientists join, or what was the unite? Yes, in that.
I mean, if I may, I mean, when I've been in number of COP meetings, and first ones when I went, then the worry was on kind of those side who said we need to go clean, we need to go green. How do we do it? How we get? I mean, to convince everybody that this is where private sector money needs to go. And then suddenly, a couple of years ago, you started to realize that it's shifting. Now, those who are worried are the oil-producing nations. They started to, I mean, put up programs that we need to maintain our share of global energy production, even if it will be different types of energy than oil and these kind of things, then it was obvious that, I mean, the decision has been done and this will be sorted. So I'm not at all worried about green turn and stopping climate change if it can be stopped by not emitting greenhouse gases anymore. On the other hand, geopolitics cannot be delegated to the private sector. Democracies have to handle it, and there I think we are not kind of there. The risks are right now higher actually than they are in this kind of managing the green turn. And really I don't have a good answer, because I would not go that far and say that let's invite private sector in to resolve that problem too, because they cannot.
We have time for very last statements, and what I have picked from your broad spectrum from heavy pessimist to optimist is that there are some words. I just say that you spoke about urgency, that we can't wait. We spoke about the problem of possible collapse of systems which we have. We speak optimistically about collaboration, cooperation, and that's the way to go further. We spoke also about revision of existing systems, and a couple of times we mentioned also the sustainable development, not exactly the goals, but the ideas related to sustainable development. Within this picture of different notions, please, will you give to the scientific audience, I hope, a more optimistic view of how we can go further in the situation?
Well, we'll see. But there was one thing that you said you were going to bring up, the role of the indigenous peoples in the Arctic who live there. But I think I should end by mentioning them, because I'm not so sure that I can do it in an optimistic way. But still it's important to bring them up, because they are, of course, affected very much by this. And after the invasion of Ukraine, you know, the Arctic 7, they just on their own suspended cooperation with Russia without informing them even. So that created big problems. And this is not the first time that they are sidelined. They have this notion of permanent participants within the Arctic Council. There was special kind of role, not on the level of sovereign states, but still. That, you know, with these big things, the Ilulissat conference in 2008, and then, you know, they were not part of it. So it's very important to bring them into decision-making for these people who live there. But we also have to think about, they're in a very uneven position. I mean, the Greenlanders are in a special kind of place in a way, because they have a right to secede if they, you know, and their arguments is not based so much on indigenous rights or decolonization or something. It's on self-government, you know, because they have this deal with Denmark, 2009 agreement there. Whereas, okay, the indigenous peoples in Canada, for example, they have territorial rights, not autonomous rights. So their position is not as strong, but still stronger than. And then we have the indigenous peoples in Russia who have very limited rights. So we have to make distinctions also about indigenous peoples, about their status when we are dealing with them, but also to give them some voice, stronger voice in decision making.
Thank you very much for bringing and reminding me about this. I noticed that we just don't have time for this very, very important question, but fortunately tomorrow we have special session about indigenous people. So,
yeah, but thinking about it, I mean, if we really want to stop this last empire in Europe, and I mean, make sure that it rather collapses quicker and with less damage than more, then actually it will also help indigenous people, because I mean, while Ukrainians are being killed in a hot war, then indigenous people in Russia have been kind of killed slowly as nations for decades and decades. So even if, and you said, let's see how the situation in Ukraine resolves, I have bad news from political side, then the ball is back in our hands, because resolving something in Ukraine, having either Ukraine even winning this war, will not resolve Russia problem. Russia problem can be only resolved if we keep the sanctions in place, keep the pressure there, be conditional in our relations with Russia for the decades to come, in order to make Russia finally, teach their school children everything which they did in Ukraine and other things like Germans did after the Second World War. Only then can we go back to normal relations with Russia, and only this way can we also help indigenous people within Russia.
At the moment, we have more polar researchers than ever, both in Antarctica and in the Arctic. And for the years to come, they definitely have a role to be very active, not just producing science published in peer-reviewed, high-quality journals. Of course, they should do that to get academic credit and so on, but to be active in the debate of the society, to take part writing chronicles and so on in the newspapers, to appear on television and so on with their findings. That is also very important to disseminate the findings about the changes going on in the polar regions, both the ice melting, the ecosystem changes and so on, which is so very special at the moment, but also for underpinning the green shift, which is so necessary if we are going to have a sustainable future. So the urgency, as you mentioned, is definitely there, and the role of scientists is really to be more active, both in the traditional academic terms, but also to take part in the debate in the society, to also influence and underpin the policy that the different nations are developing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, our experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in the linkages that we have with the scientific community is that at least in our Antarctic Institute is the level of the scientists participating in different programs is clearly increasing. So at least at the level of publishers, the people that are publishing has increased at least 40% regarding of considering what it was 10 years ago. So I think that the people has to follow that path continuously, research, and it clearly give us an important tool when we have to decide with the data, with the scientific evidence that they provide when we have to take political decisions in the different international organizations. So we need to keep in that track of the way that our Antarctic Institute is doing with the different exchanges with the different Arctic and Antarctic researchers from different parts of the world is clearly increasing. So we need to keep in that track.
And I want to bring it very close to home. So we have a very tiny country who is where a polar club is celebrating its 40 years birthday, as I understand. So and with a very strong scientific background as well. And this is already a good seed to every future that we could have. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say that thank you for very big work you have done, but also we proved that the globe is round, because we started from Chile, where we go around, and we actually ended with Chilean words. So, and thank you for your congratulations, and thank you very much, and for the audience as well. Thank you.